There are moments in life that hit you like a freight train, where everything you thought you knew crashes into something you never saw coming. This is one of those moments. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. It was just another evening, no different from any other. I had just come home from a day at work, expecting the usual quiet dinner and a few minutes of relaxation. Instead, I was met with a conversation that would alter the course of everything. I'd been married for 5 years to someone who, in my mind, was always predictable. At least, I thought she was. We had the kind of relationship where we didn't need to say much to communicate. Our routines were seamless, and our bond felt unbreakable. At least, that's what I told myself. The evening started like any other. Lydia, my wife, was sitting at the dinner table when I walked in. She wasn't wearing her usual smile. In fact, there was something in her expression, something new. It wasn't exactly a frown, but the absence of her warmth hit me like a cold gust of wind. I didn't think much of it at first. People have off days, right? Hey, I said, shrugging off the feeling. How was your day? She didn't immediately answer. She stared down at her phone, her fingers tapping away. I stood there for a moment, waiting for a response, but nothing came. I wasn't sure if I should sit down or keep standing. Finally, she looked up. We need to talk, she said, her voice almost flat. I didn't expect those words, especially not after everything we'd been through. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it wasn't on the verge of falling apart, either. Was it? Talk about what? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the unease in my stomach. I've been thinking, she said slowly, almost too carefully. We need to start using protection. I blinked, momentarily speechless. Protection? It wasn't the kind of conversation we had. We were married, no longer in the phase of worrying about contraception. We were in our 30s, and I always thought the need for such discussions had long passed. But there she was, casually mentioning it like it was nothing. Her eyes weren't meeting mine now. Her gaze was somewhere else, lost in thought, maybe even something deeper. Why the sudden change? My mind raced. But we've been fine without it. What's changed? I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling I wouldn't like the answer. She hesitated, her lips pressing together for a moment before she responded. I don't want to take any risks anymore. I think it's time we were more careful. Her words hung in the air, thick and heavy, as if she were avoiding something she couldn't, or wouldn't, say outright. My pulse quickened, and I found myself clutching the edge of the counter to steady myself. The words fell off, like they were part of a script she'd rehearsed but didn't quite know how to deliver. I swallowed hard. What do you mean by careful? We've been together for years, Lydia. I don't understand. I just think. We've both been busy, she continued, her voice softening, but the distance between us seemed to widen with every word. And with everything going on, it just seems smart to be cautious, that's all. Cautious. My mind couldn't process what she was saying. We were both in stable careers, we had a home, a life that seemed pretty well constructed. Why was this even a conversation? But the more I thought about it, the more it unsettled me. There had been other signs, other moments that I'd dismissed, chalking them up to stress or routine. But now, I was starting to wonder if I'd missed something bigger. Was she hiding something? Was there someone else? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the edge of discovering something I wasn't ready for. Something was missing in this picture, and the more I looked at it, the more fractured it seemed. I should have confronted her. I should have pressed for answers. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Okay, if that's what you want. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. Good. I think it's the right thing to do. I watched her for a moment, wondering if I had imagined the slight relief that passed through her eyes. But that was just it, wasn't it? Everything felt like I was imagining it. The distance, the coldness, the offhand way she'd said something so out of character. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. Why did it feel like we were drifting apart? Lydia was asleep beside me, her breathing steady, but the silence in the room was deafening. I couldn't help but wonder if I was the last to realize what had really been going on all along. The days after that conversation blurred together, each one feeling like a continuation of the last. I went through the motions, work, home, dinner, bed, but the weight of Lydia's request lingered over me like a shadow I couldn't escape. At first, I tried to convince myself that I was just overthinking things. She had her reasons, right? Maybe she'd read something online, or maybe it was just one of those moments where she needed control in an otherwise chaotic world. But the more I tried to rationalize it, the more my gut told me something was wrong. I didn't say much about it after that night. I figured I'd give her some space, let things settle. After all, it wasn't like we were suddenly strangers. We had shared a life, a home, and memories together. Yet, the more I looked at her, the more I felt like I was seeing someone else. Her once warm smile seemed colder now, and the way she looked at me, it wasn't the same. There was a quiet distance between us that I couldn't bridge, no matter how hard I tried. One evening, I came home later than usual, having stayed after hours at the office to finish up a project. Lydia was sitting on the couch when I walked in, the flickering light from the TV casting shadows over her face. She didn't even acknowledge my presence at first, too absorbed in whatever show she was watching. I dropped my briefcase by the door and stood there for a moment, trying to figure out what to do. Should I speak up? Should I ask her again about the protection issue? My mind was racing, but every time I tried to formulate the right words, I hesitated. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she looked up at me, her eyes briefly meeting mine. It was the first time we'd shared eye contact in days. Her lips parted, as if she was about to say something, but then she paused, biting her lower lip. I could feel the tension in the room as if it was thick enough to cut through. "You okay?" I asked, the words feeling awkward as they left my mouth. I didn't know what else to say. We hadn't talked about anything real in what felt like forever, not since the night of the protection conversation. She nodded, but the hesitation in her response spoke volumes. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired." But I knew better than to accept that answer. The silence between us stretched again, and I could feel the weight of the unspoken words hanging over both of us. There was something more she wasn't saying, and I was certain it wasn't just about being tired. "I didn't mean to come home late," I said, trying to fill the space with something normal. "I just had a lot to finish at work." She nodded again, but this time, she didn't say anything. That was the thing about Lydia. When she was upset or avoiding something, she shut down. She had always been the type to bottle things up rather than confront them head-on. I hated it. I hated that feeling of trying to get close to someone who was deliberately keeping you at arm's length. "I can tell when something's off, Lydia," I finally said, unable to hold back any longer. "We need to talk about what's really going on." Her face tightened, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a flash of panic, or was it guilt? Whatever it was, it vanished quickly, and she turned away from me, as if trying to dismiss the conversation before it even started. "There's nothing to talk about," she replied, her voice soft, but laced with an edge of finality. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what she'd just said. There was so much I wanted to ask, to demand an explanation for, but I couldn't bring myself to push any further. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was losing the battle for her attention, for her trust. "Fine," I said, my voice quiet but resolute. "But don't expect me to pretend like everything's normal when it's clearly not." I could feel the sting of those words as soon as they left my mouth. I had never wanted to say anything that would hurt her, but in that moment, I felt trapped. Trapped by the silence that had crept between us, trapped by the feelings I couldn't shake, and most of all, trapped by my own insecurities. That night, I tried to sleep, but it was impossible. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. What had happened to the woman I married? How had we gone from being partners, to roommates, to complete strangers sharing the same space? I kept coming back to that one question. Why had she asked me to use protection? It wasn't just a simple request, it was a demand, and it didn't make sense. What was she hiding? And who, or what, was she protecting herself from? There were no answers that night, just a growing sense of dread in my chest. But little did I know that the next morning would bring a new revelation, a discovery that would leave me reeling and questioning everything I thought I knew about Lydia and our marriage. The next morning came far too soon. I woke up to the sound of the alarm blaring, dragging myself out of bed with the same sense of unease that had plagued me the night before. Lydia was already up, dressed, and sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in her hands. She didn't even look up as I walked past her. I didn't know what I had expected, maybe some kind of acknowledgement, a word of greeting, or a small gesture that said everything was still okay. But there was nothing. I grabbed my coffee, sitting across from her, but I didn't know what to say. The silence between us had become suffocating. We used to talk about everything, our plans, our dreams, our day-to-day lives. Now, it felt like there was a wall between us, something that neither of us was willing to address. Did you sleep okay? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual, though my insides were twisted in knots. Yeah, she said, her voice distant. I'm fine. Her response was short, almost robotic. There was no warmth in her voice, no sign that she cared about how I was doing. I glanced at her, trying to read her, to see if there was anything beneath the surface. But her face was unreadable, like she had perfected the art of emotional detachment. I could feel the air in the room grow heavier with every passing second. I couldn't ignore it anymore, the nagging feeling in the back of my mind that something was deeply wrong. But even now, I wasn't sure what to do. Should I confront her again? Ask her outright what was happening? Or should I just let it be, let the silence speak for itself? I didn't know which was worse, having a fight and hearing the truth, or continuing this uncomfortable charade. After a few moments of silence, Lydia spoke again, her eyes flicking up to meet mine for just a second. I'm going to the gym after work. I won't be home until late. I was taken aback. It wasn't like her to be so blunt about her plans. Usually, she would mention it casually, a simple, I'm heading to the gym, but now it felt like she was trying to distance herself from me even more. Okay, I said, but the words sounded hollow, like it was being dragged out of me. I wanted to say more, to ask her if she was okay, to demand the truth, but the words got stuck in my throat. What was the point? She clearly didn't want to talk. She stood up from the table, pushing her chair back with a soft scrape against the floor. I'll see you later, she said, already walking toward the door. And with that, she was gone, just like that. I sat there, staring at my half-finished coffee, wondering how we had come to this point. Was this how it ended? With silence? With her pulling away, bit by bit, and me standing on the sidelines, helpless to stop it? I knew something had changed in her. Something deep, something that went beyond a simple argument or a miscommunication. This was different, and I wasn't the only one who noticed it. A few days ago, I bumped into a neighbor while taking out the trash. She had always been friendly, but there was an odd tension between us now. She seemed to be holding something back, her usual smile replaced by an awkward expression. You doing okay? She had asked, her voice low. You and Lydia seem off lately. I had laughed it off at first, pretending everything was fine. Oh, just the usual stuff. Busy with work, life. Nothing to worry about. But even as I said those words, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was lying. Not just to her, but to myself. Something wasn't right. I was starting to believe that everyone around me could see it, even if I was too blinded by my own confusion to admit it. That night, Lydia didn't come home until almost midnight. She hadn't texted me, hadn't called. Just silence. I stayed up waiting, my mind spiraling into darker thoughts. Where was she? Who was she with? I tried to push the paranoia away, but it was impossible. I couldn't ignore the gut feeling that something wasn't right. When she finally came through the door, I was sitting on the couch, trying to act normal. She didn't even look at me as she walked in, heading straight for the bedroom. I followed her, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but something told me I needed to find out. Lydia, we need to talk, I said, my voice trembling slightly. What's going on with us? She froze, her hand on the doorknob, her back to me. There was a long silence before she turned around, her eyes avoiding mine. I told you already, she said quietly. I don't want to talk about it right now. The words were a punch to the gut. I felt the air leave my lungs. What was going on? I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. You can't just keep shutting me out, I said, my voice breaking. I need answers, Lydia. I can't live like this. You're pulling away from me, and I don't know why. If you don't want to be here anymore, just tell me. For a moment, she didn't answer. She just stood there, her back turned to me, her shoulders tense. I waited, hoping for some sign, some flicker of the woman I used to know. But there was nothing, just cold silence. I'm sorry, she whispered finally, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. But I need space. And with that, she disappeared into the bedroom, leaving me standing there, paralyzed by a single, crushing truth. I was losing her. The following days were nothing short of torture. Every time I came home, it felt like I was walking into a stranger's house. Lydia wasn't the woman I married anymore. Her warmth had evaporated, replaced by an icy distance that I couldn't bridge no matter how hard I tried. Her late nights at the gym turned into dinners with friends I never met, and our conversations were reduced to polite, empty exchanges. But even as I desperately tried to keep up the facade of normalcy, I felt myself unraveling. One evening, after she'd gone out again, I found myself standing by the kitchen counter, staring at her phone, which she had left carelessly lying on the table. It wasn't like me to snoop. At least, I'd never been the kind of person to go through her things. But the sense of dread that had been gnawing at me finally overcame any last remnants of respect for her privacy. I just couldn't ignore it anymore. Something didn't add up. I picked up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. I unlocked it with the passcode she'd never bothered to change, the one she used without hesitation. It felt like a betrayal, but it also felt like I had no choice. I needed to know the truth. The first few screens were nothing unusual, texts with friends, reminders about work, nothing that stood out. But then, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A conversation thread from the night before. I froze, staring at the screen, the words haunting me. Had fun last night. Can't wait to see you again. The message was from a name I didn't recognize, Chris. My mind raced. Who was this person? What was going on? I quickly scrolled through the conversation, my hands shaking, and the messages only grew more disturbing. You were incredible tonight, read one message. I'm so glad we're finally getting some time alone. Alone. The word hit me like a freight train. I couldn't breathe. The truth was staring me in the face, but I still didn't want to believe it. I kept scrolling, my heart hammering in my chest, until I found a photo she had sent, a picture of her and Chris, close together, laughing. The photo was taken the night before. They had clearly been out together, and from the way she was leaning into him, it wasn't just a friendly hangout. This was something else. I felt nauseous. I had to sit down, my knees buckling beneath me. The betrayal stung in ways I couldn't describe. How could she do this? Was I so blind that I hadn't seen the signs? Was this the reason for her coldness, for her sudden distance? But the worst part was the realization that I didn't even know who she had become anymore. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved, had been lying to me right in front of my face. And now, as I sat there holding her phone in my hands, I felt like I was looking at a stranger's life. I didn't know what to do. I could confront her, but what would I say? How could I even begin to approach her with this? The minutes felt like hours. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, but I knew I couldn't stay in that moment forever. I had to make a decision. I had to find out what had happened, even if it meant losing everything. I turned off her phone and put it back on the table, trying to regain my composure. But I could feel the truth eating away at me, that sinking feeling in my stomach that told me this was just the beginning. When Lydia came home later that night, she seemed just as distant as before. She didn't even seem to notice the tension in the air as I watched her walk through the door. I wanted to say something, to confront her, but the words were stuck in my throat. What was the point? She already knew what she had done. There was no need for me to say anything. Instead, I just stared at her, my eyes searching for some kind of sign, some flicker of guilt or regret. But there was nothing. She walked right past me without a second glance, heading straight for the bedroom. I could feel the walls closing in around me. I wasn't sure how much longer I could stand it. That night, I lay in bed, wide awake, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. What now? I could feel myself slipping into a dark place, a place where everything I knew, everything I thought was real, was falling apart. In the silence of the dark room, I realized that I couldn't go on like this anymore. I had to find out everything. I had to confront her, or else I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what had really happened. But as I lay there, waiting for sleep that wouldn't come, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't trust her anymore. I couldn't trust anything. And that realization was the hardest pill to swallow. The next morning, everything felt like a surreal dream, the kind where you know you're being dragged toward an inevitable disaster, but you can't wake up. I tried to go through the motions of a normal day, shower, breakfast, work, but my mind kept drifting back to that moment. The picture on her phone, the messages between her and Chris. It was like a constant hum in the back of my mind, an insistent reminder that everything I thought I knew was a lie. When Lydia came downstairs, I could see the same coldness in her eyes, the same distant look she'd been wearing for days now. She didn't even notice the tension in the air as I stood in front of her, my mind racing, my pulse pounding. I had to do something. I had to confront her. But the question was, how? I cleared my throat. Lydia, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though it cracked slightly under the pressure. We need to talk. Her eyes flicked to me for a moment, and then she went back to tying her shoes, as though I hadn't just dropped a bombshell of a sentence. About what? She asked, almost too casually. That was it. I couldn't hold back anymore. I needed answers. About the messages you've been sending to Chris, I said, my words coming out sharper than I intended. Her hands froze for just a second before she stood up, straightening her back as if preparing for a fight. But there was no fight in her eyes. No guilt. No shame. Just a calm, cold stare. I don't know what you're talking about, she replied, the same indifference in her voice that had become so familiar to me over the past week. I took a step forward, my heart racing. Don't lie to me. I saw everything, Lydia. The pictures. The texts. Don't tell me it's nothing. Don't tell me you've been seeing him. For the first time, a flicker of something, anger, flashed across her face, but it was gone just as quickly as it had appeared. She took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing as she stepped closer to me, and for a moment, we just stared at each other, the distance between us almost unbearable. You don't understand, she said, her voice barely a whisper, but there was something different about it now, something almost broken. I didn't want to hurt you. I never meant to hurt you. I felt my stomach twist. Then why did you do it? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Why? After everything we've been through, why would you betray me like this? Her face softened for a moment, and she closed her eyes, almost like she was bracing for the impact of my words. I didn't plan for this to happen. I didn't want it to happen, but it did. I took a step back, the weight of her words hitting me harder than any punch ever could. What do you mean? What happened? Lydia's voice faltered, and for the first time, she seemed uncertain. I don't know. Everything just changed. I've been feeling distant for a while now. Things between us haven't felt right for months. And when Chris came into the picture, when he started paying attention to me, I don't know. It felt like something I needed. Something I wasn't getting from you. My heart sank as I processed her words. This wasn't just some random affair. It was a slow burn, a buildup of feelings she had never shared with me. The loneliness, the dissatisfaction. I had no idea. I thought everything was fine. But now, it was clear. I had been blind to the cracks in our marriage. I had ignored the signs, the small moments where I could have reached out to her. But instead, I chose to remain oblivious, thinking everything would work itself out. I never meant for it to go this far, she said, her voice cracking now. But when I started talking to him, it felt like I finally mattered again. I felt seen. You've been so distant, so focused on your work, and I didn't know how to get your attention. I didn't know how to make you listen. Her words cut deeper than I expected. They were honest, raw, and painful. But they didn't change the fact that she had crossed a line. The fact that she had betrayed me. You don't get it, do you? I said, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. You think this is just about not getting attention? You think you can just go off with someone else and everything's fine? You didn't think about me, about what this would do to our life, to our marriage? She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I'm sorry. I truly am. But I don't know if I can fix this. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. Her words felt like a knife to the chest, but deep down, I knew she was right. I didn't know if I could forgive her. I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was suffocating, but I could feel the weight of the truth finally sinking in. This wasn't just a mistake. This was the result of months, maybe years, of neglect, of things unsaid, of the slow unraveling of everything I thought we had built together. I don't know what to do now, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I thought we had something solid. But now, I don't know. Lydia reached out, her hand trembling slightly, but I stepped back, instinctively pulling away. I couldn't let her touch me. Not now. Not after everything. I understand if you want to leave, she said softly, her eyes filled with regret. I don't expect you to stay, but I need you to know. I never wanted to hurt you. I shook my head, the tears threatening to spill. It's not about wanting to hurt me. It's about everything you've done behind my back. It's about trust. It's about us. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, staring after me, her expression a mix of guilt and sorrow. But nothing she said could undo the damage. Nothing could take away the feeling that the foundation of my life had just crumbled beneath me. And as I closed the door behind me, I realized one harsh truth. Everything had changed. It's strange how quickly everything can change. One moment, you're living a life that seems stable, familiar, and comforting, and the next, it all slips through your fingers like sand. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the woman I thought I knew, now a stranger. I saw the words she'd said, the regret in her voice, the betrayal she had tried so hard to justify. And the worst part? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was partly responsible for everything that had happened. I had failed to see it. I had failed to listen. I had become so consumed by work, by the daily grind, that I hadn't noticed her slipping away from me. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. Lydia had left early for work, and I hadn't even realized until I heard the sound of the front door closing behind her. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee, wondering where we had gone wrong. I replayed every conversation, every moment we'd shared, searching for the signs I'd missed. But there was nothing. It was as if she'd always been one step ahead, hiding her true feelings behind a mask of indifference. I thought about calling her, asking her to come back home, but I didn't know what to say. What could I say? I could already hear the words in my head. I'm sorry. I should have paid more attention. I should have been there for you. But those words felt hollow, empty. I wasn't even sure what I was asking for anymore. Was I asking for forgiveness? Or was I just trying to salvage a piece of something that was already broken beyond repair? I decided to go to work, hoping that some distraction would help clear my mind. The hours passed in a blur, and when the end of the day finally came, I found myself sitting in my car, staring at the house. I had no idea what to do. Should I confront her again? Should I demand answers? Or should I give her space to figure things out on her own? The confusion was suffocating. It was then that I saw her car pull into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat, a mix of anger, fear, and sadness swirling in my chest. I waited, staring through the windshield. As she got out of the car, her face as unreadable as ever. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anything, really, just walked past me and into the house like she had done 1,000 times before. But this time, it was different. This time, I couldn't just sit there and pretend everything was fine. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped outside. Lydia, we need to talk, I said, my voice firm, despite the nerves that were tearing through me. She stopped, her back to me, but she didn't turn around. I could feel the wall between us, and I hated it. I hated the silence, the distance, the coldness that had replaced the warmth we once shared. There's nothing left to talk about, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I've already said everything. No, I replied, walking closer. You haven't said everything. Not yet. I'm not walking away from this until I know what happened. Until I know where we went wrong. So you can either keep walking, or you can turn around and face me. For a moment, she didn't move. I could hear her breathing, steady but uneven, like she was fighting with herself. Finally, she turned around, her eyes meeting mine, and for the first time in days, I saw something real in them. But it wasn't the love I'd once seen there. It was something darker. Regret. Resentment. I didn't want this, she said, her voice cracking, almost as if she was on the verge of tears. But it's too late now. Too late for what? I asked, my voice softening despite myself. Too late for us? Too late for everything we've built? She nodded slowly, her lips trembling. I don't know if I can go back, if I can fix this. What's happened? It's not something you can just forget. I stepped closer, my chest tight with emotion. I'm not asking you to forget, Lydia. I'm asking you to tell me the truth. Tell me why you did this. Tell me why you pushed me away. She took a step back, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I pushed you away because you weren't there, Ethan. You weren't there when I needed you. And when Chris showed up, when he started paying attention to me, I felt like I was finally being seen. I felt like I mattered. Her words hit me harder than anything she had said before. I wasn't there. I had been so focused on my work, my own life, that I hadn't even noticed how far we had drifted apart. And now, it was too late. She had already found someone else to fill the void I had left. Is it him? I asked, my voice barely audible. Is it Chris that you want? Is that what this is about? She didn't answer at first. Instead, she looked away, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. I don't know, she said finally, her voice tinged with sorrow. I don't know what I want anymore. I felt a chill run through me as I heard those words. She didn't know what she wanted. And suddenly, everything became clear. She wasn't just confused about us. She was confused about herself. She had lost herself somewhere along the way, and in her desperation to feel seen, to feel wanted, she had pushed me away and turned to someone else. I stood there in the driveway, my heart heavy in my chest. I didn't know what to do, what to say. Everything I had believed in, everything I had trusted, was unraveling before my eyes. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let her walk away from this without understanding the full extent of what had happened. "I'm not giving up on us," I said, my voice steady now, though I could feel the weight of my words. "Not yet. You owe me that much." She didn't reply. Instead, she just turned and walked inside the house, leaving me standing there, alone with my thoughts, unsure of where this was going to lead. The days that followed were a blur, a mix of sharp moments and unbearable silence. I tried to convince myself that I could live with what had happened. Maybe it wasn't the end yet. Maybe there was still a chance to salvage something, to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. But deep down, I knew better. Something inside me had broken that day, something that couldn't be fixed with apologies or promises. Lydia had stopped talking to me. She came home late most nights, her presence a mere shadow in the house. We passed each other like strangers in a hallway. There were no more dinners together, no more quiet conversations. It was as if we were both holding our breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion, but neither of us had the courage to set it off. I spent my nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how we had gotten here. Was it really just about Chris? Was it really just about her needing attention, needing something I hadn't given her? Or was there more to it, something deeper, something I couldn't see? The doubt ate at me, gnawing at my insides like a slow poison. I couldn't escape it. Every conversation, every look, felt like a reminder of how far we had fallen. But the breaking point came on a night that started like any other. I had just come home from work, tired and distracted, when I noticed Lydia's car parked in the driveway. It was early for her, much earlier than usual. I paused at the door for a moment, a strange sense of unease settling in my stomach. As I walked inside, I could hear the faint sound of the TV in the living room, but there was no sign of Lydia. I called out her name, but there was no answer. I stood there for a moment, uncertain, and then the door to the bedroom creaked open. Lydia was standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She looked different, somehow. Her face was pale, and there was something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before, an emptiness, a resignation. "We need to talk," she said, her voice soft, almost distant. I felt my heart skip a beat. Not this again. We had talked enough. We had dissected every corner of our relationship until it was just a pile of broken pieces. But something in her tone, the way she said it, made my stomach churn. This wasn't just another conversation. This was the beginning of something irreversible. I nodded slowly, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "What is it this time?" She stepped back into the room and closed the door behind her, leaving me standing in the hallway. I could feel my breath quicken as I followed her, my mind racing with 100 different possibilities. She sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. "I'm leaving," she said flatly, as though it were a simple fact. "I'm moving out." I froze. The words hit me like a slap to the face. Leaving? I could feel the air in the room grow heavy, suffocating. My first instinct was to laugh, to dismiss it as some kind of absurd joke. But I knew better. I knew this wasn't a joke. This was her decision, a decision she had clearly already made. What? I stammered, barely able to process the reality of it. You're leaving me? Just like that?" Lydia didn't answer at first. She just stared at the floor, her eyes unfocused. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation. But instead, I stood there, waiting for her to speak, wondering if this was really happening. "I can't do this anymore, Ethan," she finally said, her voice breaking. "I thought I could. I thought I could fix things. But it's too late. I've already made up my mind." I shook my head in disbelief. "You're really leaving? After everything?" "Yes," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I don't love you anymore. I don't think I ever really did." Her words cut through me like a blade, each syllable a reminder of how much I had failed her. "I don't love you anymore. How had I missed this? How had I not seen the signs?" I had been so wrapped up in my own world, so blind to her pain, that I hadn't even realized she was already gone. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say to make this right? How could I fix something that was already beyond repair? I'm sorry, Ethan, she said again, her voice barely audible. I never wanted to hurt you. I really didn't. But I can't stay here anymore. Not like this. I turned away from her, my vision blurring as the weight of her words settled in. I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was closing in on me. I had spent years of my life building this life with her, this marriage, this future. And now, in the blink of an eye, it was slipping away, and I had no idea how to stop it. I walked to the door, not sure where I was going or what I was doing. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Lydia was already gathering her things when I stepped into the living room, her movements slow, deliberate. I could hear the sound of her packing in the other room, the rustling of clothes, the zipper of a suitcase. She was leaving. I stood frozen, unsure of how to react. Part of me wanted to stop her, to beg her to stay, to fix this, to do whatever it took to make everything right again. But another part of me knew that it was too late for that. The damage had been done. The trust had been broken, and there was nothing left to hold on to. And as I stood there, my heart in my throat, I realized that I wasn't just losing her. I was losing myself, too. The person I had been, the man who had believed in love, in commitment, in the idea that nothing could tear us apart. He was gone. And in his place, there was only a hollow shell of a man who had watched everything he had built crumble before his eyes. The days that followed were the hardest of my life. Lydia had moved out, and the house felt emptier than it had ever been. The silence was deafening, the absence of her presence more painful than anything I could have imagined. I spent my days walking around in a daze, unsure of what to do with myself. The reality of the situation began to settle in. Lydia was gone, and it was my fault. I had let everything slip away without realizing it. But amidst the chaos of my thoughts, something shifted. I started to realize that I couldn't keep blaming myself. Yes, I had failed her in some ways. Yes, I had neglected the relationship, had taken her for granted. But that didn't mean I was a failure as a person. It didn't mean I couldn't heal, that I couldn't learn from my mistakes and move forward. I began to focus on myself, something I hadn't done in years. I took up running again, something I used to love but had stopped doing when life got busy. I reached out to old friends, reconnected with people I had lost touch with over the years. I started to remember who I was before Lydia, before the weight of our relationship had consumed me. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I would sit in silence, wondering what might have been if things had turned out differently. But slowly, I began to feel like myself again. It wasn't long before Lydia reached out. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation, but a simple message asking how I was doing. At first, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to demand answers, to tell her how much I had been hurt. But another part of me, the part that was learning to heal, just wanted to understand. I knew that holding on to anger and resentment wouldn't get me anywhere. We met at a coffee shop, not to discuss the past, but just to talk. It was awkward at first, the air thick with the tension of everything unsaid. But as we sat there, talking about life, about where we were now, I realized that we weren't the same people who had walked into that marriage years ago. We had both changed, for better or for worse, and it was okay. We didn't need to hold on to something that no longer worked. I'm sorry for everything, Lydia said, her eyes filled with tears. I never wanted to hurt you. I don't even know how I ended up here. But I know now that we were both lost in our own ways. I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I get it, I said, my voice steady. I didn't see it either. I didn't see how far apart we drifted until it was too late. But I'm learning to forgive. I'm learning to forgive myself, too. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything we'd been through hanging in the air. But then, as the sun began to set outside, I felt something shift within me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was free. I think we're both going to be okay, I said, my voice calm but full of hope. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but we will be. Lydia smiled, a small, bittersweet smile, but a smile nonetheless. I hope so. I really do. We left the coffee shop that day, not as husband and wife, but as two people who had learned hard lessons about love, loss, and letting go. There was no grand reunion, no dramatic moment of reconciliation. But there was something better, there was peace. And I realized that, for the first time in a long while, I was okay with it. I didn't need to have all the answers. I just needed to keep moving forward. And so I did. I focused on the things that brought me joy. I traveled. I wrote. I found new passions that filled the void that Lydia had once occupied. I allowed myself to heal, and in time, I learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to let go of the past and embrace the future, no matter how uncertain it may seem. It wasn't the ending I had expected, but it was the one I needed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free.